Hello, I'm Gina Fitt, and you've either surfed to or purposely selected Life Talk with Bern Moses. Welcome to another meaningful encounter in our series of verbal essays coming to you in this television format. Last week, Bern, we were discussing the concept of strategizing. Now, that's a term that you coined to define a law of nature that dictates success or failure. And you gave this fascinating illustration of beans and walnuts. And I was wondering if you could quickly go over that for us again this week, as it will lead into our discussion.
As the audience might have remembered, I had this bowl here last week, and we were talking about beans and walnuts and how this illustration sometimes is used to signify what causes success and what have you, and has often been misunderstood. Typically, the story is that if you get a good education and you prepare yourself and you get into the rat race and you compete and take care of number one and what have you, and you work hard and you pay the price, that someday you will make it to the top. And I'm contending that's not what's happening in here. That indeed, if that was occurring, that walnut would have to have hands to grasp with, arms to pull with, and legs to push with, or a mind with which to manipulate. It doesn't have any of those things, it's just a walnut. All it has is size. Now, the law of stratification says that when different sized we'll say the elements in a particular environment. Now, if it's different sized molecular structure of liquid or solid or gases, that when there's volatility, the larger objects will always appear at the outside. I say outside only because Buckminster Fuller, for example, said that, you know, we go out and in, not up and down.
Yes.
That's a faulty premise. Those walnuts will always appear at the outside, and we say, well, they make it to the top. And we were saying that that's not what's happening. That indeed, when you have different sized objects in the environment, the little objects crowd in and around and underneath and elevate. We could take this moment, for example, to give this illustration. What have we done in the past to the medical community? People at large elevated the doctor. I mean, they deified the doctor because we knew we needed them. We knew we were going to get sick, we were going to get hurt, and we needed the doctor, so we elevated him to a place in our community that was really almost godlike. They had the last word on everything. However, there's a change. There's a change in that. In other words, some of the doctors took themselves too seriously. They began to give us just moments of their time and charge us for hours. They did surgeries that were not necessary. They got off on a tangent, and somehow people began to take care of themselves. And when they did that, then they pulled the doctors back down again. You know, in other words, it just goes on all the time that way. What it's about is contribution. In other words, if somehow the masses feel that you're contributing to them, they will elevate you for their own best interest. Now, you know, you injected last week, I think. You said, well, wait a minute, are we beans or walnuts? Something to that effect.
Right, right.
And of course, we're all walnuts. We're walnuts. The only thing of it is that a lot of us are wearing bean suits. You know, a lot of people have been diminished. They've had their authority, their esteem, and their initiative reduced by parents and siblings and peers and management and bosses and teachers and one thing and another. And so, and they didn't have much choice from the time they were born until they were maybe 6. But then they started to participate themselves. And at 12, we really kick in and demean ourselves. And we don't know who we are, so we tend to conform in order to hide out until we can find out who that is. And so we participate in putting on the bean suit. As we shrug a shoulder and we accommodate, we acknowledge, and we surrender. And we become less than what we were intended to be based on our capacities.
Yes.
And so I'm saying we're walnuts, but we're in bean suits. Okay? But the good news is that there are zippers in the bean suit. In other words, there's a thing called commitment. That's a giant zipper that runs from the throat to the crotch. That when you unzip that, you begin to emerge as an individual, reaching for your full capacities. There's other zippers. Forgiveness, terribly important to clean up your past in order to have a brighter future. You know what I mean? There's a lot of zippers that we have, and we'll discuss them throughout the entire series that we do. But the idea is to emerge, to grow, to expand. Now, the way to do that, you remember we talked about the bowls. There was bowls of water, and I had sponges. And when we put the sponge in, just tentatively, leaning it against the side, not totally committed, it absorbed some information, but it wasn't complete. It looked a little silly, a little incomplete, if you would, unfulfilled. It wasn't until you get off the edge, until you make what I call a commitment, that things begin to occur. And I'm going to start this little list right here. You've got to make a commitment. Once a commitment is made, remember we talked about there were several things that would happen. There would always be an absorption.
You talked about being in the proper environment
Right.
to absorb things that would help you to expand your bean suit or to break out of that.
Now let's be clear about one thing. It doesn't have to be the proper environment. Whatever
Okay.
environment we choose
Okay.
or we find ourselves in, we're going to absorb what's there.
Now, that's
See, I mean?
interesting.
Yeah, see, in
Yes.
other words, you have to be discerning about what environment you spend your time in and use some choice about that, because, you know, it's often been said that we're a common denominator of the people we spend our time with.
Yes.
Because we absorb, we accumulate, we assimilate what is in that environment, whatever it happens to be. We absorb, accumulate, assimilate, and acquire the elements of that environment. And in so doing, develop a certain awareness, a knowledge from that environment. And that's of the mind. The mind is going to be influenced by every environment we spend our time in. This is of the mind. Then there is skill, which we will develop through association, okay, which is of the body. And then we're going to accumulate a certain amount of power, okay? And that power will come to us through authority. In other words, for example, if we get promoted or if we get elevated by someone, well, we accumulate some authority because we have knowledge and skill. Or we are given celebrity by people. In other words, they honor us, they pay homage.
I see.
The word is fanatic, they become fans. Wow. Okay? Or you may acquire, absorb money, which is always powerful. See?
Very powerful.
Now, the key, in order to capture stature so that the law works for you instead of against you, is contribution. Contribution. In other words, when you're in contribution, you're outside of yourselves. You're not in survival. You're educating, elevating, enhancing, and enriching something or someone else. And that's a nice, nice place to be. And frankly, it attracts attention. And people tend to give you more authority, more power, more celebrity. And frankly, in our socioeconomic environment, typically more money. See what I'm saying? And so this goes on all the time. Now, let me go back and talk about strategizing just for a moment. And then we're going to come back to some of these issues that are terribly important.
Wonderful.
Strategizing is a portmanteau word. Portmanteau is a French term that means when you take two things and put it together to make something else, you've got a portmanteau. Okay? What I did here was to take strata, or stratification, and put it together with sizing, S-I-Z-I-N-G. Okay? Now, strata sizing. By definition, what I meant that to mean was the human propensity
Yes.
to expand or contract as we respond or react to life circumstances. Okay? And the way to do that favorably, positively, and to grow in stature, okay, is to make commitments selectively. In other words, find a purpose, find something that makes your heart sing, find a place where things are occurring, there's things there that you want to learn and to do, and to commit yourself, if only for a little while. And knowing that when you do that, you're going to acquire knowledge, skill, and power, and the intention is to take that and enhance and enrich someone else's life. It's not about competition. It's about contribution, about cooperation instead of competition.
If I may, last week you talked about putting your foot in the water, a partial commitment, and the fear that comes along with that sometimes. And I find that's a difficult thing,
To make the commitment?
to make a commitment,
Oh,
and
yeah.
there seems to be a lot of fear.
Well, we're not practiced in it, too. You know, commitment, just the word itself, has come to a place in our society where it's almost like a prison. You make a commitment, you're trapped.
Yes.
I mean, how many men are saying that women won't make a commitment, or women are saying that men won't make a commitment? As a matter of fact, in the last 3 years, I have sat in audiences, congregations, where two young people in front of their family and their community and their God committed themselves to each other for a lifetime. And they're already in trouble. They're already dissolving as a relationship. You know, it's because they've had no practice, no preparation, and how to make a good one. And so we want to spend some time on this today so that we can make the law work for us instead of against us. It's terribly important. Now, I know when the walnuts come popping to the top, several years ago I was doing this in a seminar, and are they in there? Because if they are, they will come to the top. There they go. When that occurs, it's supposed to be inspiring. But I had a guy in Pennsylvania some years ago said, Mose, the only thing that proves you got to be nuts to get ahead. And
well, maybe there's some truth to that.
Exactly, because it is. There is some truth there, because people who make commitments, who find a purpose and commit themselves to it, are different somehow. I mean, they are different. They talk a little faster, their eyes shine a little brighter, they're a little bit more energetic, their body movements are jerkier by comparison. I mean, there's a strangeness there. For example, the Greek word for enthusiasm meant divine madness. Divine madness. I'll put this over here. Isn't that interesting? Madness, because when you're in that state of commitment, excitement, enthusiasm, there's a certain energy that's kind of overwhelming. If you've ever been around someone that's just found the new truth, boy, they want you to have it, and it's got to be that way for them, and it's very difficult to be around them. And yet, those people have divinity too. They have God within them almost. I mean, they're the ones who get things done.
It seems like we're all there for about 2 weeks into the new year. We have our resolutions that and we're going to do this. I'm going to lose 5 pounds. I'm going to go to the gym every day. I'm going to get that promotion this year. But Bern, it seems like within a few weeks or maybe a few months, we're gone. The commitment is gone, and we throw our hands up in despair and we say, oh, well, I'll try again next year, or I didn't want that anyway.
This might be a good time to get into this. We've got to learn how to do this well. In order to do it well, we have to define it well.
Yes.
See, commitment, what does that really mean? I'm contending that the best definition that I have come up with for commitment is that this is something I'm going to do or die.
Now that is scary.
Yeah. Now, let me parenthetically say, you're not going to die. It's okay. But what am I trying to do when I say that? If I say this is what I'm going to do or die, at least I capture the attention of someone that I really need to be on my side, and that's my subconscious mind, which is a survival mechanism. And when you say this is what I'm going to do or die, at least it goes, what? What are you going to do? You know what I mean? In other words, and you feel the rats and roaches running around inside.
Oh, yes.
In other words, if you just say, I'm going to make a commitment to do this, you'll feel stuff go on inside the body. And what that is, it's a subconscious resisting. It's on guard. It doesn't want to do this. It doesn't know what it is, but it's not right. You know what I mean? Particularly if you give that definition to it. So if you're going to define it that way, you're going to have to be real careful about the commitment you make.
Absolutely.
And what I'm saying is there is a process of doing this where you can get stronger and stronger and stronger as you practice the process. And if I may, take a moment to go through the process of commitment. If you're going to make a commitment to something, I would think there should be a little bit of time spent considering it, wouldn't you?
Absolutely.
A consideration phase.
Yes.
We're going to start with consideration. In other words, what good is going to come out of this? You know? What might be the case, what might not be the case, how am I going to gain, how am I going to lose, can I really do this, is this the right time? Little consideration process. Now, part of the consideration should be, or should include, how concise can I be about the commitment? That's how specific can I be? Can this commitment be compartmentalized? That's important.
Yes.
Compartmentalized. Now, can I break it down into little manageable units and then commit to each one of those instead of the big one?
Sometimes
that's important.
That seems like that would be more manageable. Are you suggesting then that we perhaps write this down on paper?
Oh, yes. Except for little commitments. I'll show you what I mean in a second.
Okay.
Consideration is how concise can you be? How can it be compartmentalized? Who can you coordinate with? In other words, do you or can you coordinate?
Yeah.
And what that means is who can I reach out to find who has made a comparable, similar commitment and align them with me. And those with their tape or the book, or maybe take them out to lunch and say, how did you do this? What were the considerations? What was it like? Because almost any commitment we'll make, someone's probably already done it.
Someone you can learn from.
Yeah. I mean, who can you coordinate
Yes.
with? Then maybe who can you collaborate with? Who can you draw into the commitment with you, because there's safety and strength in the numbers. See what I'm saying? Who can I get it to do with me? How will I celebrate the completion? That's an important part of the process. Now, what am I going to do to celebrate when I'm through? How will I know I'm completed?
Like a reward?
Okay. Now,
Okay.
that should certainly be part of the process. Now, so all these things have to be in place. And then there's a point of choice. There has to be that moment when you say, this is what I choose to do. And it has to be yours. Someone else can't make a commitment for you. It's got to be yours.
Yeah.
When you choose to do it, you establish a contract. Now, any contract to be valid has to have three parts to it. One, it has to be dated. In other words, when did you start?
I
Precisely. What was the understanding or understandings involved? Okay, and you should put your signature to it.
Now, this could be a contract with yourself, I suppose.
Absolutely, absolutely. And like I said, depending upon the size of the commitment, this can be just done in a flash. And that signature could be your pride, your ego, your reputation.
Oh, that's an interesting
See what
way
I'm
to put
saying?
it.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it could be anything. You contract to do it, and then you proceed to continue. And you must continue. See, and that should be part of the consideration process. Can I continue to the point of completion? See, you got to continue through the boredom that will set in, through the frustration, the upset, the setback, the agitation, the misunderstandings that will occur. Okay, you have to commit to continue through those to the other side to completion, and the completion is certified by the celebration. Okay, so this is a process. Now, for example, if a person is not used to making commitments, or, for example, if you have made a number of commitments, I excuse them from all of them. You're excused. Because you didn't know how to do it right.
We get to start over.
Start all over.
Wonderful.
Yeah, erase, and start all over, and using this as a guide. Okay, here's what we do. Better start light. Let's make a little commitment.
A little commitment.
Say you're driving down the highway and you got a friend with you. And you say, hey, I'd say to you, let's make a commitment. And you say, okay.
Okay.
And I say, and when you do this, by the way, check in to see how you feel. You'll feel the bubbles. Little rats and roaches beginning to run around.
Yes.
And you say, okay, what are you going to do? So I'm going to exit at Madison Avenue. And we're going to stop at that stop sign up there. And you say, okay, let's do it. Okay? And we exit at Madison, and we get to the stop sign, we give it a little high five. Give me a high five. Hey, we did it.
All right.
And the subconscious goes, that wasn't bad. I could do that.
That's a very small commitment.
Exactly. See, but it's a little process that the mind goes through. It goes, oh. See, we have to always assuage, quiet, calm, reassure, and acknowledge the subconscious mind. And so we say, hey, let's do another one. It'll go, what?
Another?
And let's go over to the mall and get a yogurt. Well, it doesn't know, okay? And you say, okay, let's do it. And you put a little intensity to it, and you get over there and you have your yogurt and another little high five, and it goes, oh. And pretty soon you make another little commitment, and the idea is, in order to recapture the authority in your life, you have to have lots of completions. See, be aware of celebrating your completions. You could have lots of them every day if you choose to. Therefore, you could have made a lot of commitments, a lot of little things that when you stack them up mean a great deal. Okay? Little peak experiences, if you would. Now, let me give you an illustration. It was 9:05 a.m. Tuesday morning, September 2nd, 1972.
You remember that.
When I did that the very last time. You know what I just did? Okay. In other words, you think I quit smoking, but I didn't. Let me explain what we're up to. I indeed smoked up to that point in my life, and I had quit a lot of times. I had no business smoking. I had Lapis cough. I burned my clothes. You know that polyester back in those days, and I was a walking, blaze, a potential blaze.
Oh, my goodness.
But, I was in bad shape. And I decided that I really didn't need to do this anymore, so I went and found a beautiful young friend of mine. It was a friend of the family. Her name was Beverly. And I asked her if she would coordinate with me in an effort to stop smoking. Well, she was a little reserved about it, but she said, well, I'll look at it with you. And so in the coordination See, I collaborated with Beverly, and in our coordination, part of what we did, went to Parkland Hospital and talked to people who were dying with cancer, who attributed their fate to the fact that they'd been smokers. We talked to the doctors and saw some autopsied tissues. See, this is the coordination process where you gather all this information as to why should I do this. We looked at autopsied tissues, and I mean, it makes you think when you see tissue, and you say, "Does my lungs look like that?" And the doctor said, "Yeah, probably."
Wow.
You know what I mean? And then we looked at some slides,
Yes.
and we gathered some information that was quite profound. And so in this concept, we were getting more and more aware of what to do. Concise. What were we up to? I'd quit smoking before, and I stopped, went right back to it again. So I was going to do that this time. This time the commitment was to never put a cigarette in our lips. Pretty hard to smoke through your ears and nose. It doesn't look good. It doesn't look good. You know what I mean? So if you can't put a cigarette in your lips, pretty hard to do. And so we committed to not putting a cigarette in our lips.
You changed your commitment.
Right. Changed the statute a little bit. Another thing, though, we did compartmentalize. We gave each other permission to smoke any time we wanted to on the hour. But it had to be right on the hour. For example, I suddenly have an urge for a cigarette, and I look at my watch, and at 10:02. What have I got to do?
Wait until...
Well, I got to wait till 11. That was the deal. Okay. If I got real clever and I kind of waited until maybe 1 or 2 or 3 minutes till 2 and kind of hung around just waiting, I couldn't light up until 2. And at that moment, just that moment, I had to make a choice. And it was easy to get past it.
Because it was just a moment.
Just a moment,
so
exactly.
you really compartmentalized
Exactly.
the activity.
And that gave us a lot of reasons for celebration. See, every time we completed an hour and was conscious of it, it was a cause for a psychic high five.
So you had 24 celebrations in a day, potentially.
Well, 18 to 20, yeah. Anyway, a lot of these, can you see how this works, though? Okay, we chose to do it. We contracted to it. That's how I remember the date. To know when you made the commitment to do something and when you actually started, to be able to move away from that and celebrate is part of the celebration. See what I'm saying? To be able to move away and say, it's been, because every time I tell people, it was 9:05 a.m., Tuesday, September 2nd, 1972, I just kind of bubble. You know what I mean? It's nice to know that.
What a
It's
wonderful
nice to know
feeling.
that. Exactly.
Yes.
Now, and you continue. Now, I continued. I understand it was about, I guess, 8 years into the project, and I heard that Beverly had started smoking. I was living in another part of the country, and I wasn't there to, know for sure, but I never said a word to her, never wrote to her. But on our 10th anniversary, on that day, I wrote a long letter thanking her for making the commitment with me and reassuring her that probably both of us were better off for having had the experience and what have you, and I sent her the letter. I understand when she got it, she what? She stopped again, hadn't smoked since.
Now that's where you go from commitment to contribution.
That's right. See, the commitment prepares you, okay? And during this process, I was acquiring and assimilating better health, and awareness, a story, a strength, okay, power, if you would,
Power.
in order to make a contribution. Now, there's no question I'm in much better shape now than I would have been if I hadn't done that, okay? Now, this whole process is about commitment, absorption, contribution, over and over and over again. A commitment doesn't have to be free. So, in other words, for example, if a young person studies medicine and goes to a community, they've made a contribution to that environment. See what I'm saying? So the contribution doesn't have to be free, but it has to be elevating and enhancing and enriching something or someone else. That's what it boils down to.
Yes.
And you keep doing that over and over and over again, and there's strength, there's growth, there's personal development that accompanies this. There's no question. It's kind of like strategizing. I use this illustration sometimes. It's kind of like if you have a balloon. See, whether you're conscious of it or not, you and every person that's watching us, I know I, have a certain stature in our community. We have a certain stature in our homes. We're perceived a certain way. In our jobs, in the community, in our church, whatever it happens to be, we're perceived a certain way. If we don't do anything about that, if we just leave everything just the way it is, will that balloon, will that perception grow or will it diminish?
It will diminish
It'll
over
diminish.
time, I
Yeah,
believe.
sure it does. Especially if you're surrounded with other people who are growing. So you've got to be
Yes, I
really aware of
see.
what's going on around you, because if they're growing in a relative way, you're getting smaller. See what I'm
Yes.
saying? So what do? You read a book. Okay? Little growth on that. However, you're going to lose it unless you what? Share the contents with other people. Encourage them to read. Buy the book. Give it away. Convey to others what you've learned because you still have it. See what I'm saying? In other words, that's a contribution. Anytime you go beyond your expectation, when you complete the other person's job when they're tired or perhaps ill, you know what I mean? Then you've grown a little bit in that environment. You have to be careful. I mean, there's no question. You violate some of the fundamental laws of society. Because if you lie or cheat or steal, you can lose a lot of stature right away. See what I'm saying? But it goes up and down this way. That's what I mean by straticizing. You have plus sizing and minus sizing. And you can be aware of it as it occurs if you're conscious of the process, if you're conscious of it. Commitment's a powerful term. There's something interesting about commitment. Committed people who have that reputation with themselves and with their environment are left alone. People don't bother them much. I don't have a whole lot of people coming up to me with their problems trying to keep me from doing what I'm about. I just never have. I remember in high school, and I wasn't even conscious of this back then, but I think I'd been affected by the beans and the walnuts in 1938. Because I came and went as a student in high school to the point of the ridiculous. I played hooky half the time. I was always in some kind of project, wouldn't go to class. Teachers never give me any trouble. People say, how do you get away with that? I said, I don't know. Then I went in the military the same way. However, there I was more conscious of it. When I joined the Navy in 1947, everyone told me who'd been in the military before, there was one thing I wasn't supposed to do. What's that? Volunteer. Well, you don't ever volunteer for anything in the military. And that didn't seem right to me somehow. I mean, why go in if you're not going to get involved? And so I went in to not wait for them to ask, but to look for things that perhaps needed to be done.
Now that's an unusual approach.
Oh, yeah. And it just seemed a natural thing to do. And I was always left alone. I didn't have one uncomfortable experience in 10 years in the military as an enlisted person. It's just amazing how the world, I'll tell you what it is, you do more than is expected of you. You get in concert with this law, and people will leave you alone because they don't want you to stop.
That's a fascinating concept.
Yeah, they don't want
and
you
what
to
a
stop.
wonderful contribution that you're making by sharing this information with me and with our television audience. I'm sure that they've gotten a lot of value from this. Bern, as we're coming to the close of our program here, I want to again thank you for sharing this with us and the time that you spent with us. And perhaps we could sign off. And
well, I don't know how much time we have, but I would plea with everyone to go out and make it a good day for somebody. And that way 2 people would have had a nice day. 2 lives would have been enriched, enlivened, and enhanced. And Gina, I want to thank you and everyone that's watching, and hope that we'll see you next time. And meanwhile, remember that my name is Bern
Moses.
Thank you, Gina. Bye-bye.